Good day, everyone. I am Ronald, the moderator for this webinar. I welcome everybody to today's webinar that will be on Employee Handbook requirements for 2024. Includes update federal, state, and local regulations, as well as multi-state regulations. I want to introduce our presenter for today, that is Margie Falk. Margie Falk, PHR, SHRM, CP, HR Compliance Advisor, Speaker, HR Compliance Solutions LLC is a senior level human resource professional with over 15 years of HR management and compliance experience. Margie is a speaker and accomplished trainer and has created and presented compliance seminar and webinars for over 16 US and international compliance institutes. Margie holds professional human resource certification PHR from the HR Certification Institute HRCI and SHRM CP certification from the Society for Human Resource Management. I would now like to hand over the floor to the speaker. Over to you, Margie.
Thank you, Ronald, and I want to thank everyone in attendance today. You could have been anywhere else. You chose to be here with us, and for that, we are truly grateful. Now, we do have a lot of material to cover, and I want to leave ample time for questions, so let's jump right in. So we have a material to cover of one of my favorite topics, Employee Handbook, and you will see why as we move along. We are going to learn to identify and prepare for employee handbook violations. We're going to also be aware of all the new regulations that will impact your company. The course will identify the most common employee handbook violations and how to mitigate them. And you will learn which regulatory agency will focus on which regulation and mitigate the risk. We will also show what policies will land you in hot water. We're going to also look at the must-haves for your employee handbook. We're going to look at why social media and the impact of penalties are when employees choose to speak negatively about their employer. And we're going to learn why employers need to follow the National Labor Relations Board and why they should care about policies that can be unlawful with new requirements. We're going to learn how your managers and supervisors can be your ambassadors in the workplace or could be your compliance downfall. And we're going to look at how training can be one of your first line defense in litigation. So let's talk about that employee handbook. It's one of the 4 documents reviewed by lawyers in employer litigation. Changes in regulations go hand in hand with changes to employee handbooks and standalone policies. Now, 2024 has really been one of those years that are more critical when it comes to your employee handbook. Federal, state, and local regulations are in place and regulatory agencies are revving up for an audit focus for 2024 and beyond. Now, 2024 has brought with it some handbook legal trends, okay? And it's now more than ever timely to make sure that you update your handbook. The National Labor Relations Board now has submitted their new employee handbook changes that can make employee handbooks legally unlawful. Now, the NLRB has the authority to monitor and make changes to employee handbooks for union and non-union workplaces. There is a lot of impact based on outdated employee handbooks. So trending policies must be included. Now, the employee handbook is a critical tool, okay? And it does link to compliance, employee handbooks, and standalone policies. Most employers have employee handbooks. Other employers choose not to have an employee handbook, but prefer standalone policies. And this training focuses on both. One of the concerns I have about standalone policies is that you have to get them signed for them to be really violation-free. We talked about some of those trending federal regulations. Okay, and they started back in 2023. We're now in 2024 mid-year, and we're certainly going to see changes happening beyond. It's also changes in state regulations, including multi-state, employee-centric or employer-centric states. Now, states may be considered as employer-centric, those with more protections for employers, or employee-centric, with more protections for employees. When there are federal, state, and local regulations, the regulations with the most benefit to the employee supersedes. Do not underestimate the legal impact your employee handbook can have on your risk management strategy. Now, there are ways to make sure that your employees, okay, are aware of compliance, especially with your handbook. The remote work changes to the workforce. The hybrid workplace is a little different. It has employees working on site, a few days a week, and then working remotely a few days a week. So let's start talking about your employee handbook. Is it looking behind the times? Well, perhaps it's time to get an update. Another thing you have to consider, if you have not updated your employee handbook since 2024, you could be violating changes in federal, state, and local regulations. Well, how about having one handbook or more? So what should be included in an employee handbook? The company health care benefits, include health insurance, life insurance, dental coverage, vision coverage, retirement, 401ks, health spending accounts, flexible spending accounts, long and short-term disability coverage, and voluntary benefits. But let's talk about the company benefits, employee perks. So there's other topics for employee handbooks. Let's look at some employee handbook content samples. 24 policies just in this particular slide. Here's another checklist. The employee handbook has several components, legal policies, time off policies, benefits, values, pay structure. You have to understand that all of those are part of an employee handbook. So now I ask the question, what should be excluded from your employee handbook? So what are the phases when you're developing an employee handbook? Major thing. Have your employee handbook part of your goals and objectives. Add it to your calendar. Federal, state regulations. There's internal policies and procedures that companies want to add or delete. Employee handbook is communication to employees. Diversity and inclusion. Wow, there were several companies that after June 29th, 2023, and the U.S. Supreme Court upended affirmative action in higher education. Diversity and inclusion programs also are part of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, which is the enforcement arm of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. National Labor Relations Board, the NLRB, has the authority to monitor and make changes to employee handbooks for union and non-union workplaces. The role of the NLRA. Section 7 of the Employee Rights and Concerted Activity protects non-union and union employees. But why should we really care about this? There's examples of concerted activity. More examples of concerted activity. So what's not considered protected activity? Now is the time to update your employee handbook. And what policies will become unlawful? Supervisors are not covered by the NLRA. So here's a list of all the other policies that are unlawful. So what should employers do now? Well, they should be prepared to make the transition from civility rules to employee rights in their employee handbooks. Who can file an NLRB charge? So what penalties can the NLRB impose? Here's some employee best practices when you're dealing with the National Labor Relations Board. Legal update. federal regulations challenged in 2024. Now, the Supreme Court just upended the legal world by significantly reducing the power of federal regulators. We just talked about the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the Department of Labor. So how will this impact employee handbooks? Changes are obviously coming. Let's talk about the Texas federal court. They delayed the effective date of the Department of Labor's new overtime rule. What should employers and professionals do? So we're going to end with what's trending for 2024. At-will employment policy statements. These are things that need to be part of your employee handbook if you don't have them. EEOC's proposed enforcement guidance on harassment. Anti-harassment policy. Make sure you have one. You need to be aware of how artificial intelligence is impacting all of your documents. You have to have a retaliation policy. Social media policy. Make sure it matches up to the updated, policies under the National Labor Relations Board. Employee handbooks can't include everything. So at this particular time, I'm going to hand it over to my partner, Ronald. Well, thank you, Ronald, and thank you for being such a great partner. Okay, I also want to thank everyone for attending this. I know there's been a lot of updated news. Just wanted to make sure I added it so you could be aware. Okay, I really do look forward to seeing you all virtually in future training. But at this time, I will say be safe and so long.
Thank you, Margie. Thank you so much for this training. And that concludes the session for today. Thank you everyone for participating. You may all disconnect now and have a great day ahead. Thank you.